Good morning, everyone. My name is Priscilla Arsenault, and my presentation today addresses cross-linguistic sign language communication. I'm sorry I couldn't be here live today, but I do hope you enjoy my recorded version. Sign or sign languages referred to in this presentation are languages principally used among members of what linguists call the culturally deaf communities and are used by deaf people around the world. Malone, 2011. As Sandler, 2001, points out, sign languages are natural languages, in the sense that they're not consciously invented by anyone, but rather develop spontaneously wherever deaf people have an opportunity to congregate and communicate regularly with each other. Sign languages exhibit the full range of expression that spoken languages afford their users. They rely on hand signs, facial expressions, body positions, motions, and other physical signs in order to communicate. Different styles are adapted for different social contexts. Storytelling has been heightened to an art in some deaf communities. Deaf poets create artistic poetry in signs, arranging the formational elements of the languages to convey images, emotions, and ideas. Sign language can do everything that spoken language can. Why is the study of sign language so important to linguistics? In general, it helps us understand the very nature of human language. For example, it appears that while the individual structural properties of sign languages are attested in spoken languages, no spoken language has the same clustering of properties that characterizes sign languages. Mahoney, 2011. Furthermore, despite the fact that vocabulary is different from sign language to sign language, their grammatical structures seem to be remarkably similar to each other, and developing an explanation for these observations will require language theorists to move well beyond the ideas generated by the study of spoken language alone. Consequently, it's safe to say that the academic world is now convinced that sign languages are real languages in every sense of the term. Leahy, 2014. The United States currently uses three major forms of sign language: American Sign, ASL, Pidgin Signed English, PSE, and Signed Exact English, SEE. ASL is used by many deaf in the United States, thus its use promotes assimilation into the deaf community. ASL is a visual language, and speed reading or listening skills are not needed to learn ASL fluently. It has developed over time through usage by deaf individuals. ASL is a language complete in itself. It is not usually written or spoken, but can be translated, just like French or German to English and vice versa. Pidgin Signed English is probably the most widely used communication mode in the United States among deaf and hearing persons who work with them, and many teachers use PSE. The vocabulary is drawn from ASL but follows English word order. The words that do not carry information, such as to, are often dropped. This means that the signer can easily speak while signing, since it is possible to keep pace with the spoken language. Signing in Exact English is based on signs drawn from ASL and expanded with words, prefixes, tenses, and endings to give a clear and complete visual presentation of English. This also gives a child an opportunity to develop an expanded vocabulary. In addition, the learning of this English-based sign system may be more comfortable for English-speaking parents. Taken from 2011 National Science Foundation report. Since sign language, like spoken languages, developed naturally and is not a system invented and handed over to the deaf community as, say, an assistive device, it then makes sense that different countries have different languages. Although not known with any confidence, it is speculated that there are perhaps 300 sign languages in use around the world today, and new sign languages emerge frequently through creolization and de novo, and occasionally through language planning. In some countries, such as Sri Lanka and Tanzania, each school for the deaf may have a separate language known only to its students, and sometimes denied by the school. On the other hand, countries may share sign languages, though some under different names: Croatian and Serbian, Indian and Pakistani. Deaf sign languages also arise outside educational institutions, especially in villages, communities with high levels of congenital deafness. Woodward, 1991. The linguistic status of American Indian Sign Language, acronym AISL, is considered an endangered language variety. It has been learned and used as a primary or secondary language among members of some American Indian communities since the 18th century, and possibly earlier. AISL has been maintained over the past several generations, chiefly by tribal elders, and those efforts have been buoyed by the deaf tribal members who have acquired it as a fluent means of communication within their own native communities. While research continues to identify different AISL dialects and the number of remaining native signers, reportedly hundreds of North American Indians still use and understand AISL to varying degrees of proficiency and mutual intelligibility. The AISL variety has been transmitted for many generations and used internationally among dozens of American Indian nations of the United States and Canada, today representing mainly Algonquin and Siouan language families. Davis, 2016. Barbara Lee Master of California State University, Long Beach, conducts research on a rare and dying form of gendered Irish Sign Language used in Dublin, Ireland. In one segment of the Dublin deaf community, the native vocabularies for women and men are so different that they can impair communication on the most mundane topics. For example, men and women have different signs for everyday terms such as cat, night, red, even days of the week, as seen on the current slide. Interestingly, these varieties emerged from sex-segregated education at 2 residential schools for the deaf in Dublin. Nicaraguan Sign Language arose in the early 1980s when hundreds of previously isolated deaf individuals were brought together in schools for the first time, the result of an educational reform movement dedicated to providing literacy training and a 4th grade education to everyone. For virtually the first time, it became possible to directly observe the emergence of a new language. Malone, 2011. This case is particularly interesting because this language arose not as a result of language contact or creolization of previously existing languages, but rather from the merging of idiosyncratic gesture systems, called home signs, that were used for communication within the immediate family by the first generation of deaf children to enter the schools. Home signers quickly began to share their idiosyncratic systems. Young children exposed to a mix of gesturing began to produce a communication form radically different from their input. The new form was more fluid, more complex, and wholly language-like. With no coexisting signed languages and limited access to Spanish as a result of low literacy and the inability to hear, the only possible source of this highly complex linguistic structure is the human brains of those very young first language learners. Maloney, 2011. For decades, the practice of awarding foreign language credit for American Sign Language coursework has been fiercely debated at universities across the country. Some educators argue that indigenous language by definition, can't be considered foreign. Others say a language must have literature for proper study. And then there are those who feel it lacks the same elements of culture as other foreign language courses. Paroline, 2003. But some linguists and advocates for the deaf say reluctance to give foreign language credit for ASL is often based on misconceptions about the language. As shown throughout this presentation, the study of ASL provides the same benefits as the study of more traditional foreign languages, the ability to communicate in additional language, and the awareness and understanding of a different culture. Wilcox, 1991. In addition, ASL does have a body of literature which Rutherford, 1992, points out quite nicely in The Culture of American Deaf People. Quote, some critics have questioned whether there is a body of literature of culture. The ASL literature output consists of a wealth of materials in stories, poetry, plays, and folklore in print, video, and film formats. The folkloristic tradition of deaf America is over 175 years old and is complete with legends, naming practices, tall tales, folk speech, jokes, sign play, games, folk poetry, customs, ritual, and celebrations." Unquote. The need to communicate is universal. For those within the deaf community, the need to communicate in sign is universal. As early as 1951, at a gathering of the World Congress of the World Federation of the Deaf, the idea of unifying the sign languages was being discussed. They realized that having hundreds of interpreters at every event just wasn't feasible. Still, standardizing a sign language internationally has not happened with any one national sign language. However, there is a sign language system called International Sign Language, ISL. It was previously called Genesto. It uses various signs from several national sign languages and was first used in the 1970s at the World Federation of the Deaf in Finland. However, within the World Federation of the Deaf, their official languages, French and English, are still used for documentation and correspondence. The idea of unifying sign language hasn't been as prolific as the Commission had first intended. There just are not that many people that have been willing to learn the new language. Although in Europe, a lingua-franca has developed, a sort of Creole sign language that some have begun calling an international sign language. Whether it will ever catch on or not is unknown, but is something to watch out for. Jones, 2011. Well, this concludes my presentation, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for your time and interest. And may peace be with you all.